This is Mark Leckman, Chair of the Newbury Human Resources Board, confirming that all members of the subcommittee and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Diane Doyle,
Yes.
John Ferrara,
Here.
Tony Antico,
Here.
and Mark Leckman here. We'll hold on staff for a moment. Again, Tracy will join us shortly, but we'll give her permission to participate in the meeting as well. And of course, Jean Ackley, Director of the Library.
Present.
Present. Thank you. You said, was that present or president?
Definitely present.
Not president quite yet. Okay, thank you, Jean. Good morning. This open meeting of the Newbury Human Resources Board Subcommittee is being conducted virtually, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, and the current state of the emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. The order, which you can find posted on the town's website, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not, however, ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment as it is not a public hearing. For this meeting, the Newbury HR Board Subcommittee is convening by Zoom meeting link as posted on the agenda of the town's website. All the materials for this meeting, except any executive session materials, are available on the website, and we recommend the members and the public follow the agenda as posted on the website. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of board members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you're not speaking. Jean, we typically dispense with the need for that since there are typically, this is not a 18 or 20 person meeting. So with only 5 or 6 of us here, I don't think there's any necessity to mute just to make it easier, but just bear that in mind, please.
Yeah.
And please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and be sure to state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in dialogue with each other, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And with that in mind, is there a motion to open the subcommittee?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, roll call vote. Diane Doyle,
Yes.
John Ferrara,
Yes.
Tony Antico,
Yes.
and Mark Leckman, yes. And with that, Jean, let me ask you if you'd like just to share a couple of introductory thoughts, comments as to is the reason you felt it was appropriate to schedule the subcommittee now. Oh, before I do that, let's welcome Tracy to the meeting. Tracy, you can hear us?
For my tardiness, yes, thank you.
Good morning, no problem. We've just gone through the script for conducting this according to the open meeting guidelines. And just as you plugged in here, I've asked Jean if she'd like to make a couple of introductory comments.
Sure. Thanks for having me. As I said, I had submitted these positions for consideration last year at this time, before everything went crazy with COVID. So I had asked Tracy just to see, I had never really heard much, so I just was curious where things had landed. So here we are a year later, and I've always, I would love to get a clearer understanding of how employees move horizontally within their classification. I know we don't have a step program as per se. We usually get a 2% COLA each year, but I've always wondered if there was a merit-based or a performance-based way or algorithm or whatever you want to call it for employees, as I said, to move within their classification level. So separate from what we're, these two descriptions, I'd love to get some more information on that. And then just basically, to paint the picture of the library staff that, we've lost positions over the year. We're a very small staff, so staff wear many hats. And we find that everybody pretty much, a lot of us have taken on jobs that weren't in our job description. Happens all over town, I know that.
Sure.
But specifically with the reference position not being there anymore, we lost that about close to 10 years ago, I think now, which is a higher paying position. It's in a higher classification. Many of the staff, or mostly Jane, who we're discussing today, and Marcia, the two circulation librarians, the ones who are basically on the front lines with the public when the public is in the building, they have taken on a lot of reference tasks. So separate from what I've laid out here in terms of the archival work that Jane has taken on in her circulation role. Her circulation role in and of itself, I think, merits just taking a look at to see if, if it does require some sort of pay increase or, recognition that she has taken on more tasks. And then the same is true for the other position, the library associate position, where she too has taken on a lot of extra tasks. And both of these women have masters in library science. So I don't know, I'd like a clearer understanding, if I could, of how education level, what kind of implication that has for all of this as well.
Okay. Thank you, Jean. Appreciate that. Let me just share a couple of quick thoughts just in general, and then I'll ask other members of the subcommittee if they have other thoughts or questions to share, and then we'll dig right into the first job description. As I think you're aware, Jean, because I'm not sure. Have we gone through a classification subcommittee meeting with you many years ago?
I think with somebody else, but not with me personally.
Okay.
I think there was a meeting with some library
Okay.
staff.
Okay. So just to clarify, the role of this subcommittee, or its charter, I should say, is to make recommendations of where any particular position sits within the town's overall classification range based on 9 very specific factors that I assume you may have in front of you. I don't know if you have those.
Diane just sent them to me, so I
Okay.
really haven't had a chance to review them.
Okay, well, as we go along, you can do that.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning and the end of our charter. In other words, we have to stay tight to these particular factors. And so other things aren't necessarily taken into consideration. We don't take the budget into consideration. We don't necessarily take how someone may take on an additional role or roles, unless there are specific examples where somebody's overall level of responsibility has increased dramatically, or something dramatic has shifted within that particular range. And as it relates to comp level, which is the first question you had, how do people move? Again, that is not the purview of this subcommittee. We do not have responsibility for setting pay rates. We never have. I don't anticipate that we ever would. That's a function of discussions between the supervisors, the managers involved. Certainly town administrator has a role in that process. So that really sits outside of the subcommittee. Our charter, again, is to stay tight to the factors. So I hope that gives you some clarity.
It does.
And in terms of using comparative data, comparative information, again, it's always helpful to help understand where the pay rate may be, but not necessarily the classification. That again is an internal. That's kind of how the sausage is made, kind of a discussion, if you will. But it doesn't have an impact in terms of the classification, except in one small case, and we get to this at the end, once we've gone through all the factors, then what we do is we look at, to be fair, there are a number of miscellaneous things that we might take into consideration. And in this particular case, one of those might be, what is the pool of candidates that would become available to us if we needed to go to the outside? How wide is that pool? How narrow is that pool? Does it sit somewhere in the middle? And that may be the only place where we might factor in for an example, a 14.1 versus a 14.2 or a 14.3. That may be a gating factor, but that remains to be seen. And then lastly, and then I'll open it up to other points of view. This is both an art and a science, these classifications. And so what we do is we look at each role independently and make our evaluations based on those factors. But then at the end, what we try to do is then we take a broader view of how does the classification we just created fit into the structure of the town? Does it make sense? And if you look at a role individually and say it may be a 12.3, and then you say, well, let's look at other 12.3s across the enterprise. The good news is, overwhelmingly, it makes sense. But every once in a while, we come to a situation where it says, well, this person is a 12.3. There are two other 12.3s in town. Does the town look at their responsibilities, duties, contributions in a similar light? And if not, then we may make some minor adjustment at the end, but that doesn't happen all the time. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So with that in mind, let me open it up to other questions, other thoughts to start off. Diane Doyle?
Thank you, Mark, for detailing kind of the purview of the board. The other thing that I would add is when we talk about the factors, Jean, I just shot those over to you. You'll be able to follow along as we go through them. Bear in mind that when we look at those factors, we're looking at the responsibilities of the role and not a specific individual.
Right.
So while you have, Jane in this role right now, it's really looking at the role itself and as it relates to the factors. So I would point that out. But no, I think Mark, has done a good job of laying out what we'll be doing here this morning.
Thank you, Diane. John Ferrara?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Tony Antico?
I just have a question mark relative to the submitted job descriptions. When do we look at these, or do we just go right into the classification?
Typically would go into the classification. Usually we don't spend a good deal of time in the job descriptions per se, unless you feel that there's something amiss or there are questions you have. If it's wordsmithing or small edits, and that's something we might recommend to Jean after the case, just to clean up a couple of things. But if there are concerns or questions you have about the job description, feel free.
Well, only because the descriptions are substantially different from the existing description. Apparently, these are proposed job descriptions.
I would call them more updated, perhaps.
Okay.
I'm guessing, Jean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing what you did is you went through the existing and made some wordsmithing or other more substantive changes based on what current responsibilities are.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that what we're looking at in red, at least I've got it in red, is the proposed.
Exactly.
So it's really just kind of updating what the current responsibilities are, as opposed to, in other words, each time we see red, it doesn't necessarily mean new responsibilities or significantly greater responsibilities, just changes in how you're describing them.
Yeah, although I would say that in some cases it does reflect greater responsibilities.
Okay, well, we can get through that as we go through the factors. Wherever the factors bump into the job description, we're happy to address that.
Okay.
Tony, did you have anything else?
No, not right now, Mark.
Okay, and I don't have any, I didn't mark anything either. So with that in mind, Tracy, did you have any thoughts you wanted to share?
The only thing I wanted to mention in terms of moving within the ranges, you had mentioned, Jean, much like we did for Aaron Wimet, that's all subject to, budget availability, and performance. I hope to be working with the committee and considering performance evaluations, but that's for next month. Something that we haven't historically had here in Newbury, but we've been talking about it for many years. So that may provide you with another opportunity. In the future.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay, good. So with that in mind, if I don't see any hands raised with other questions or observations in front, let's dig right in here. Shall we get to the more senior of the two, the circulation? Oh, you're recommending a change from circulation librarian to head of circulation,
Yes.
correct? Okay, let's tackle that one first, and we'll move through the factors. The first factor is complexity, judgment, and decision-making. It speaks to the variety of activities. It speaks to the difficulty of the problems faced. And Jean, you'll see as we go through this here, each of these factors has a ranking of 1 through 6. 1 obviously being in general, more routine, more basic, and ranging all the way to 6, which is this person creates policies for the town. Okay, so in this particular case, complexity, 1 would be the work is repetitive. There are simple tasks performed on a repetitive basis. Decisions are rarely required and limited to tasks performed. An example, and I won't read every bullet items, but as you can see, 2 would be, routine work, variety of tasks within standard procedures. Occasional exceptions are encountered, makes recommendations that are based on affected tasks and how they could change outcomes. 3 would be somewhat complex, requires some analysis and planning. Decisions involve identifying alternatives. Exceptions are analyzed and resolved. 4 is, this is complex work. Analysis and planning are integral parts of the position. Decisions are made and exceptions to standard practice and are precedent setting. Exceptions require in-depth analysis, all the way up to 5, which is highly diverse and complex, and 6, policy formulation. Diane, where has this been rated previously?
Previously, this was a 2.
A 2. Jean, what would you like to speak to here?
I'm just trying to read all these descriptions.
Yep. By the way, I should also mention, Jean, that sometimes what the committee chooses to do is to, in effect, split the difference in that, when we take a vote at the end, if you feel, if an individual subcommittee member feels like it's not quite a 3 or it's not quite a 4, but it may rise level than a 2 or a 3, then we might make it a 3.5 or a 2.5. So that opportunity exists as well, just so you know. Your thoughts?
So currently it's a 2? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
currently it's a 2.
Okay. All right, well, that sounds right. I'm just moving on to 3 to see if anything applies.
Yep. And the other thing to think of also is that we try to factor out what we call outliers. And by that, I mean, we try to look at what the standard duties and responsibilities are day to day, week to week, month to month.
Mhm.
Understanding that every once in a while, there might be an ad hoc project, there might be a fire drill that's required. There may be something that requires additional responsibility or judgment or complexity. But if that's not an everyday occurrence, if it happens occasionally, we try not to factor that in. We try to be true to the system, sort of the letter versus the spirit of the law. So with that in mind.
Okay.
So it has been a 2.
I would say there's some 3 in there. The decisions involving identification of alternatives, I mean, that is definitely a part of that position.
Mhm.
Excuse
And would
me.
you say that's a fairly common occurrence?
No, not common, but part of it. It exists.
It exists. So occasionally that person may be responsible for
Yes.
making those kind of, okay.
I don't know. I guess I would have to say that, a major component of this position is customer service. We call it patron service.
We're gonna, excuse me, Jim, we're gonna get to that in another factor. So just so you know.
Okay,
Yeah, this is strictly as it relates to the sort of the duties and responsibilities, the functionality of the job. And I promise you, we will get to, when it comes to the contacts factor, we
Okay.
do get to who they work with and who they're responsible for communicating with.
okay. So because
Okay.
that was all I was going to say was that sometimes decisions do have to be made in regards to how to interact with patrons.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. I'll open it up to members of the committee. Diane, this is general conversation, not voting.
Okay, based on what Jean has explained in the job description, which I read, and I would probably lean towards remaining at a 2. I think 3 exceptions are analyzed and resolved by changes to standard procedures. I would think that would be leaning towards her interaction with Jean as the library director in making those decisions. So I see this as a role where she has a wide vast of responsibilities, but all within certain parameters of how she goes about her day. So I would say that they're fairly routine in my opinion, but I'm open to, any thoughts on other than that, but I would stick with a 2.
Okay, thank you. John Ferrara?
The only thing that might take it above 2 level, and I don't have a good sense of how far above, would be the organic aspect of library science today. And that's emerging and evolving technologies, and having to stay abreast of all of that might spike it just a little bit.
Okay. Thank you, John. We may have temporarily lost Tony here. It looks like I don't see him on the screen.
Oh.
Diane, do you see him trying to plug back in perhaps? Have we lost him or?
Looks like we might have lost him for a minute.
Okay. Well, we still have our quorum, so that's fine. We don't have to delay matters any. We'll let's, good. I would, I would agree that it does not rise to the level of a 3, but to John's point, I could see us potentially moving this to a 2.5, given the fact that there are projects that do require some analysis and planning, and there are the exceptions to be made, even though they're made in concert with discussions with Jean. So I can see the wisdom of moving it to a 2.5.
Could I just ask something too?
Sure.
I haven't really addressed the archival side of her work and how that's all working right now. She's being paid separately through library state aid for her archival work. In her archival work, there is definitely more decision making and more planning and all of that. So I don't know if you want to address those separately or how you want to do that exactly.
So you have this in the job description as part of her day-to-day
It is,
responsibility.
yes.
Okay.
I added that at the end.
Yeah, I think that is a factor as well. I'd be comfortable moving it up to the 2.5, but let me, I see we don't have Tony still, so let's move ahead. So let's,
Okay.
if there's no further discussion, let me take
Just
this.
one
to a
point
vote.
is of some interest. I put a star next to the emerging technologies, and I put a star next to preservation techniques and practices, stabilization and archival aspects.
Yep.
Just because she brought up. Add another opportunity to maybe lift 2 to 2.5.
All right, thank you, John. If there's no further discussion, let me take that to a vote. Diane Doyle?
I think a 2.5 is fine. I'm fine with that.
Thank you. John Ferrara
0.5.
and Mark Leckman, 2.5. Thank you. Let's move to the next factor, which is education. You've got this, Jean, you've got this in terms of education, you're saying bachelor's in a related field. I'm assuming that for the master's would be gravy, but it's not a requirement. You've got bachelor's degree. Is that the way I'm reading this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So rank, obviously, a 1 would be, up to high school graduate. A 2 is a high school graduate. 3 is formal training beyond high school. 4 is completion of a 2-year. 5 is a bachelor's degree. In your eyes, is this, by the way, has this position always required a bachelor's level degree?
I believe so, yes. And I would say that if we were to post this position tomorrow, we would post a master's degree in library science preferred,
Preferred, yeah,
viable candidates with experience, yada,
Right.
yada, yada.
right. But you would certainly consider hiring somebody with a bachelor's degree.
Yes,
Yeah, and that's the prerequisite. The preferred is always something that's outside of our purview. We look at what would be considered the minimum acceptable
okay.
position. So this one seems to be pretty straightforward. Any discussion of that? Bachelor's level degree, which would make it a 5? Diane, any discussion?
That would be no change. It was a 5 prior.
John?
I agree with Diane.
Okay, then let's take a vote on that. Official vote. Diane Doyle,
5.
John Ferrara,
5.
and Mark Leckman, 5. Thank you. Experience. Is considered the time required to develop the necessary skill and experience to perform the job duties and responsibilities. As I'm just reading through in general here, experience is defined as the length of time required to acquire the minimum skills necessary to fulfill the duties. Considering the complexity of those issues faced and the amount of judgment exercised. And the rankings go from anywhere from a 1, which is 1 to 6 months of relevant experience, up to a 6, which is more than 10 years of experience. And I don't think you've listed, correct me if I'm wrong, Gene, I don't see anything in the job description which talks about your expectation.
I just lost you.
Yeah. Mark, we lost you for 1 second.
He's muted, maybe?
Nope.
Hear her?
There you go.
Oh, okay.
We lost you for a second.
Okay, sorry about that. Gene, I'm sorry, I did not hear your answer.
No, I don't. Again, that wouldn't be something, or at least it hasn't historically been something that I put in the job description. It would be more in the job posting. So I don't know if in the past, Diane, maybe it was part of the job description. I don't know.
Yeah. This job hasn't been posted, obviously.
No, not, she's been in the position for 6 years.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess the question is, what is the relative amount of experience that you would expect to have somebody in this role, assuming you need to bring somebody in from the outside?
I would say 1 to 3.
1 to 3 years of relevant experience.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You might want to add that to the job description just so we'll have that for future reference, Gene.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Diane, let's open that up.
I looked at the last job description and it reads 3 years of experience.
Oh, you did have it as 3. Okay, I didn't see it in the old one. Okay.
The old one, the old one. So somehow that must have gotten removed.
Yeah,
So,
okay. 3 years.
so I would be comfortable with 3 years of experience, which would be a 3.
Yep, okay. John Ferrara?
I, again, would stay with the old,
The 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years is terrific.
Yep, okay. And Mark Leckman, I would agree that 1 to 3 year time frame seems reasonable, which would put this at a 3. So let's, if there's no further discussion, let's take the formal vote. Diane Doyle,
3.
John Ferrara,
3.
Mark Leckman, 3. Thank you.
By the way, I texted Tony, he lost the internet.
Oh,
Could be power lines down,
Okay.
whatever,
Okay.
but he said he's been unable to recover it.
Okay, thank you, John. Well,
Okay.
fortunately, we can move ahead with the quorum. Next factor is independent action. The initiative that this person would be required to perform with their duties and responsibilities, again, on a regular basis. Creativity, original thought, the amount of direction and control received from supervisor here, or by standard practices. A 1 would be this person works under close supervision, receives detailed instructions, no latitude to make changes, refers all but the most routine questions or problems. A 2, defined by standard practices and established procedures, prioritize tasks, occasionally makes decisions on the setup of the work, refers all significant problems and/or concerns to the supervisor. 3, works under occasional supervision, refers unusual problems to the supervisor, proceeds on his or her own when a majority of duties are defined. Excuse me. 4 would be work with general direction and guidance, applies policies and standards, plans and carries out plans and activities. Assignments may involve creative work. 5 would be works independently on general assignments, plans and carries out broad assignments, takes actions without reference to their supervisor when a policy change is required. And a 6 works independently in a wide range of administrative and policy-making activities. Diane, where has this been rated?
So I feel a little uncomfortable like referencing back because I feel like it steers the conversation a little bit. But I'm happy to share it. I mean, it was at a 2. Based on Jean's kind of expansion of the role a little bit, I probably am leaning towards a 3. I don't know if it rises to a 4. Just kind of looking to see. Yeah, I wouldn't see it as anything higher than a 3.
Thank you. John Ferrara?
I agree with Diane.
I'm just looking at a 3 here. Proceeds on own when a majority of duties are defined by general instructions, establishes methods or clearly defined precedents, uses initiative and/or ingenuity to identify potential problems, and conducts research to determine a viable solution and discusses the result with the supervisor, and refers unusual problems to the supervisor. I would agree that sounds reasonable. I certainly think we can bump it up from where it had been at a 2. A 4 is plans and carries out plans and activities to attain definitive objectives, applies policies or standards widely accepted within the occupation. Assignments may involve creative work, which is a little bit of a different animal. I would also be comfortable at a 3. Jean, you have any thoughts you want to share on that?
Well, I would say that both of them work. I think quite a bit of 4 works, but what's not in there is still reports to the supervisor. But I would say plans and carries out activities to attain definite objectives, applies policies or standards. Of course, many of these policies and standards are dictated by the library consortium and not necessarily by me. So that's
Right.
the way that the library world is a little bit of a different animal.
Right.
And she is the co-chair of the circulation committee. So she does determine quite a few of those policies. And assignments may involve creative work and or innovation, which I would say with her home delivery program and all of that, that's definitely true. It's just that it doesn't have the refers unusual problems to the supervisor part in 4.
Mhm.
If
Well,
that
again,
was in there, I would say it would be a 4.
okay. I could see the merit of possibly bumping this to a 3.5. I think Jean makes some good points there as it relates to some of the additional responsibilities that the role has been granted over time and what she would expect going forward. But if the group voted on a 3, I'd be fine with that as well. Anyone else have discussion points they want to share on this factor? If not, let's take it to a vote. Diane Doyle,
I would stay within a 3.
John Ferrara,
I agree, a 3.
And Mark Leckman, I would say 3.5. But in this case, the majority would hold. We'll make this a 3. Next factor is consequence of errors. This factor assesses the likelihood and probable effect of errors on the job, and it considers who is affected. Is it the unit within the department? Is it the entire department? Is it the entire town? Could it be the public at large? What is the extent of losses to the town which could result from inappropriate decisions or judgments? Are these normal versus extreme errors? What is the possibility of serious consequences? How easy is the error to correct? And some examples of one would be errors are readily detected, costs and the impact are minimal, errors are easily corrected, may cause loss of credibility to the person. A 2 would be errors are probably detected by others within the work area, may result in brief delays in services or completion of tasks. The cost might be somewhat noticeable as materials are replaced. There could be a slight loss of credibility to the unit of the department. In this case would be the library itself. 3 would be errors affect the work of others, but generally they're not damaging to the town itself. Repairs or replacement to equipment maybe aren't completed quickly. Errors are detected and corrected before they become serious. It may cause loss of significant amount of time. Errors may have an adverse effect on the public or employee relations. A 4 would be substantial and identifiable losses to the town beyond damage and waste as a result of inadequate planning, may cause substantial delays to services. Identifiable deterioration in public employee relations. Errors may result in physical injury resulting in lost time. I don't think we would need to go beyond a 4 here. My judgment, if anyone disagrees, please raise your hand. If not, Diane, where was this previously?
This consequence of errors was a 2.
A 2, okay. Jean, your thoughts?
I'm just still reading through. This isn't where we're talking about customer service. Is it? Is that a separate?
Yes, that's more of the factor of the contacts, which we'll get to. I mean, there would certainly be a customer service element here if as an example, you know, some corrective measures were required because of the consequences of a failed action or a mistake that was made. And so the fix, if you will, might require some delicacy in customer service. But I think in the context that you ask it, it probably sits under what the contacts are. So
Okay.
this is really more a function of, you know, how egregious would a mistake be? How serious are the consequences to the town, to the library itself, or just to that individual or the unit within the library? And I think that's where it was rated a 2 previously.
And we're really talking more errors, not behavioral errors.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I would say 3.
Okay.
What
Thank you.
brings you to 3? The only thing I circled was stabilization in archival materials. I mean, obviously, that's an important part of any strong library program. There's some elemental risk there, but I'm not so sure how far-reaching any of the other elements are. But I'd be willing to go to 2.5 or 3 as well.
Mhm. Based on the archival nature.
Archival nature and actually reaching back to the previous discussion, the home delivery and the aspects that implies, given the strange pandemic world we're living in today.
Mhm.
That's certainly a highly charged location on her responsibility list.
Mhm. Okay. Diane, other thoughts?
I would still lean towards a 2 or 2.5. But when Jean talks about the archival aspect of the position, it's my understanding that it's about 1 to 2 hours a week. It's a small portion of the overall responsibilities. And Jean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you had mentioned somewhere 6 hours a month. So to talk about that aspect of it, Mark, it's kind of speaks back to, the outliers, if you will. I mean, that is, my understanding is that's a small portion at this point of the function of that job. And again,
My sense was more as to what can go wrong. I participated on a study group at Texas A&M for the Vietnam archives, and mistakes were made and some permanent loss of materials after action reports, and it was devastating. It changed the complexity of how history is written now. So I don't claim to have any technical expertise. It's just that one experience where I was witness to a mistake made and its far-reaching impact.
Jean, you want to share a thought on that?
I would agree to that to a certain extent. I mean, these are some of the things we have in our archival collection are, standalone material that is very, let's say, important to the community. And yes, if damage was done or things were lost, there would certainly be a price.
Consequence of that, okay.
Yeah.
I would tend to agree that that in this particular factor, we would probably want to be less concerned with the amount of time this person spends on archival matters weekly, and more on the, as John said, the degree to which a mistake that was made might have an impact beyond the individual. If there are town-related matters that are involved in this archiving, I think we want to make note of that, and so I would tend to agree that that might bump it up a bit. So, you said it had been at a 2 previously, Diane?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could see us bumping this up a bit to maybe the 2.5, given the archival nature of the work. Any other thoughts on it before we take a vote?
Nope.
Okay, Diane Doyle,
2.5.
John Ferrara,
0.5.
and Mark Leckman, 2.5. Thank you. Next factor is contacts. Jean, this is the one you've been chewing on for a while. Contacts refers to the relative importance to the organization, excuse me, of the working relationships required. Excuse me, I just had to clear my throat. Contacts refer to the relative importance to the organization of the working relationships required of the position. The contacts can be internal or external to the organization. Contacts may take a variety of forms: face-to-face, on the phone, public appearances, media. The factor also assesses who are these contacts, what is the purpose of the contacts, and what is the importance to the town of these contacts. They could include residents, elected officials, members of town boards, appointees, co-workers, etc. Interaction may cover a variety of purposes and complexity. Advising, coaching, disciplinary, common courtesy is expected at all levels. It runs a rank of 1, which is very routine. Basic information is given and received. No significant contacts beyond the immediate associates. 2 is routine with occasional discussions outside the immediate area. It may involve delivering or receiving goods, frequently providing routine information to more than one source. It may have contact with the public, town officials, boards. 3 is frequent and important beyond the immediate associates. Tact to discuss problems as a resource person, make recommendations, clarify policies. Limited responsibilities for securing cooperation. Regular contact with the public, the town officials, boards, etc. Some responsibility to persuade, convince, and secure cooperation. 4 is frequent and important for the purposes of clarifying town procedures. Interpersonal skills to clarify the contact's issues and to communicate information. Requires in-depth professional knowledge of the subject being discussed. 5 would be frequent and important, often around the topic of deep personal concerns to an individual, a stakeholder, example, somebody who's looking for tax abatement or compliance with federal or state regulations. Requires advanced communication skills, tact, persuasion. Successful resolution will result in the stakeholder feeling respected and heard. And 6 is matters regarding importance of a wide variety of group of stakeholders, major considerations in the performance of the incumbent's duties, constant maintenance and development to avoid being blindsided. Where have we been on this, Diane?
It's been rated a 3.
Okay, thank you. Jean, your thoughts?
Just trying to digest all of this. I feel, well, in a perfect world, I guess I would be inclined to say a 5, only because the person in this position is more or less the face of the library, at least to the patrons, not to the entire town and not to town boards and things, although that can be the case too. But they are the face of the library, and this position, when we hired Jane for this go round, and if I were to hire tomorrow, interpersonal skills would be a huge piece of what we'd be looking for. Ability to resolve problems and to have a high level of customer service skills. So, I'm torn between 4 or 5, but the required advanced communication skills, tact, persuasion, presentations, etc., is a very important part of that position. People may not be complaining about their tax bill, but they may be complaining about the fine they got, or claiming they didn't lose a book, or the library's not open enough, or whatever it may be. So, until things get so difficult that the director has to be called in, that person is pretty much the sounding board. So yeah, I would say some combination of 4 or 5, to be honest.
Thank you, Jean. Open it up to other discussion. Let's start with you this time, John.
The responsibilities stretch to grant funding, and as Jean indicated, she is the face of the library. She's the first respondent, and the patrons, I suspect, are her charge, and that's a lot of responsibilities in interpersonnel relationships, as well as her charge and her responsibility. It's the pledge to take care of the patrons. They are the library, and then the adults, that's children, children of all ages. That's
Yes.
enormous responsibility. My kids spent untold hours in that library over the years, from K through 6, and even when they were at Governor's. That's we have 6 plus 8, that's 12, and 24 years of coming and going to that building.
Thank you, John. Diane, your thoughts?
I have some thoughts on this one. I vastly disagree with increasing this to a level of a 4 or a 5. I think that when we speak about context and customer service, I think customer service has to be part of any role that we have here. I mean, clearly, yes, I understand this is sort of the front desk, first appearance of the library. However, I think when we're looking at contacts, we need to understand the level of involvement that we're having with those contacts and the importance of that role. I'm not suggesting that the role isn't important, but I think there's a difference between I'm just looking at, for example, Jean, I'm going to point out that in this category, you are rated a 3.5. So to suggest that her level of contact with the public is at a much increased level over the director of the library, I have a little bit of a sticking point there. I think, looking at it, the assistant library director is rated a 3. So while I understand that, much is in the way that we have the assistant tax collector, being the front line of the tax collection process, the customer service level is a base of how we all operate within town. I think when we look at contacts, it's what level of contacts, the importance of those contacts, and I personally would not look at this role as anything above a 3 from that perspective. So I'm looking at how it all fits within, the range, and I look at Jean and the assistant library director. I can't imagine Jean would warrant a level significantly above her own role.
And I understand. This is my first exposure to any of this, so
Yep.
I'm still trying to understand it. I guess I'm a little surprised that the director is just 3.5. But again, I'm still trying to get a grasp on just what all this is and the scale of it.
So I look at some of the senior level management within the town, and those are positions where they're interfacing with contacts that are, very high level, and again, I understand that the customer facing positions are so integral to the function of your department, much in the way that the front facing department here at the tax collection window is a front facing and very important role. However, I wouldn't equate that front facing role as with a level of contact at a 5 or 4. So my position would be that I think it's at a 3. She needs to operate with tact. She needs to be a resource person, make recommendations, be pleasant, securing limited responsibility for cooperation, regular contact with the public, town officials, boards members, and some responsibility to secure cooperation and acceptance. I don't think it's at a level of a higher level. That's my position.
Thank you, Diane. It's an interesting conversation. I think we should continue it to make sure we're comfortable where we land here. I think Diane makes good points. I mean, we do have to recognize that every role within a municipality that has a public-facing element, it's a given, frankly, that person should bring to those conversations tact, good customer service, if you will, the ability to communicate effectively, not only your own thoughts, but town's policies, procedures, positions. And then as I read the from 4 to 5 especially, and I think and again, this is, I guess, both the letter and the spirit of the way the factors are written, Jean, when, as an example, in the 5, when it talks about frequent and important, often around topics of deep personal concern. I think there's a reason that when those factors were created, they gave the examples that they did. Somebody has charged in a town hall, hopping mad about a tax abatement, and there are significant dollars involved. There's other factors to consider, and I want to be careful with my choice of words here. I don't think that's the same level of carefully crafted dialogue that somebody might be required to have day to day when talking about a library fine, let's say. Not that they're, again, unimportant to that person, but I think we have to understand the spirit in which the factors were created. That said, I understand your point about being the face of the library, and I think it's a good one. And frankly, I'm maybe not as concerned with the fact that, as an example, if we decided to bump this to say a 3.5, that might be at the same level as the director or somebody else. I'm less, I mean, that we always look at that at the end, of course, to make sure there's consistency across the board. But, if it meant that down the road we had to look at this factor with others, that's fine for me. Again, I don't think it rises to a 4 personally myself, but I could see the possibility of bumping it up a bit. Other thoughts? Anyone else like to weigh in here before we take a vote on it?
Could I just say a few things?
Please.
So I'd be curious to know what positions would go to a 5 or a 6. And just to also put in there for the purposes of discussion, I suppose, you know, the fact that public buildings are, you know, can be dangerous places. I mean, that's why we have panic buttons all over the building and we go through, you know, active shooter training. So,
Yep.
you know, just to keep in mind for town hall, for every place, that that person that's in the front desk may talk somebody down, you know, from doing something very, very violent.
Understood. And unfortunately, the life we live these days, that's always in the shadows. But again, it's not something that we can
Right,
factor.
I'm not, yeah, I'm not saying
we
it
do
necessarily
talk.
applies here, but just something to
we
keep
do-
in mind.
We do talk later on in one of the other factors about working conditions and such, and there may be a place for a little bit of that in the conversation then.
Right, right.
This is strictly on the basis, who are these contacts and what, you know, in comparison to the rest of the town municipal population, what is the degree to which those contacts are critical to the town itself.
Right.
So
I understand.
with that in mind, if there are no other discussion points, let me open up to a vote. Diane Doyle,
I would vote a 3.
John Ferrara,
I agree with Diane, a 3.
and Mark Leckman. I'll keep this as a 3 as well. Thank you. Next factor is supervision. And this is the one factor, Gene, where we kind of do two different things. First, we look at what we call the character of the supervision, which is, you know, what are the supervisory responsibilities, the nature of the position supervisory role, if obviously if there's no supervisory activities, no points are rewarded. And then the scope refers to the actual number of employees that this person supervises on a day-to-day basis or on a very regular basis, if you will. So with that in mind, in terms of, we're looking at first the character of the supervision. 1 is it's a lead position. They may allocate work. They may be responsible for attendance records. That's a 1 to 2. I'm sorry, they lump it together as a 1 to 2. A 3 is limited supervision, does not have full supervisory responsibilities for a unit, assigns and monitors the work of coworkers, may be involved in recruiting, may train. A 4 is supervises positions performing related work. Responsibilities include recruitment, training, coaching, prioritizing. The positions supervised generally perform related work. May have supervision over a department or several units within the same department. May have subordinate supervisors. Check that, I'm sorry. That was a 5. General management may have supervision over department, my mistake. Where has this been rated?
Character,
Character, yeah.
it has been rated a 3.
Does not have full supervisory responsibility for a unit, assigns work of coworkers, may be involved in the recruitment process. A 4 is supervises positions performing related work, so forth. Jean, your thoughts?
I think a 3 it makes sense.
Other discussion? Tracy?
Jean, would you, just for my understanding as well, where we've adjusted Erin's position, can you talk a little bit about who supervises who in the hierarchy in the library?
So Erin is the person in charge in the absence of the director. And
Excuse me,
Jane-
I'm sorry to interrupt, Jean. I'm sorry, I don't know names and positions, so.
Oh,
if
yes,
you say
sorry.
that- So
Yep.
if you don't mind, let's stick with just, if it's okay, position titles, just so we're clear on what we're talking about here.
Sorry,
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's Tracy's fault.
it's my fault. Sorry about that.
That's all right, no problem. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on who we're talking about. Go ahead, Jean.
Yes, so assistant director is in charge in the absence of the director. And the circulation head is in charge in the absence of both of those people. So that is our work.
Thank you.
Okay, Tracy, did I answer your question? Okay, Jean, you're good with that. Let's open it up to other discussion.
I just want to ask the question about supervised aspects. Obviously, Erin Ouimet is your assistant. Who is the direct supervisor of the associates and the technicians? And the volunteers?
In terms of work assignments and task assignments, the circulation librarian supervises those for the library associate in circulation, and the youth services librarian supervises the library associate in children's.
That would
But
be Katie.
that would be Katie, but everybody still reports to me, if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
That gives us the hierarchy.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, let's vote. John Ferrara,
I'd retain the current number.
and that's, refresh my memory, Diane, that's a 3.
Yes.
And Diane, I think Jean said you were comfortable with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very generous. I think
Yeah,
it's, you know,
Okay, so
Yep.
John Ferrara, I'm sorry, your vote was a 3, just to clarify?
Great, yep.
Thank you. Diane Doyle,
3.
Mark Leckman, 3. And now we get to the second sub-factor within supervision, and that is the number of staff. Obviously, none would be a 0, 1 to 2 would be a 1. Where has this been ranked?
Well, I mean, we just went through the hierarchy of the library function, so I don't see it as anything higher than a 1.
Mhm.
I mean, purely based on the numbers. I mean, we're not saying that she doesn't supervise anybody, but on a consistent basis, it's no higher than a 1 to 2 people.
Jean?
This may not be related at all, but when we have volunteers, and we have usually 13, she does supervise many library volunteers.
Mhm.
I don't know how that plays in.
That may be one of those outliers we discussed earlier in the conversation where, you know, we try, in order to be true to the classification system, and again, this, you know, there's not an exact science here, but we try to, we take into consideration the regularity, the frequency. Is it day to day? Is it ad hoc? Is it somewhere in between? And usually when we talk about supervision, we try to be consistent with, you know, how many people in a department, or it could be the occasional volunteer, how many people on a day-to-day, very regular basis. And it sounds like that some of that is done, but not necessarily a day-to-day. And so given that, I think that the 1 to 2 makes more sense. Other thoughts on that? All right, with that, seeing no comments, let's take that to a vote. Diane Doyle,
1.
John Ferrara,
I would think 1.
and Mark Leckman, 1. Physical demands, next factor. The degree, frequency, severity, intensity, and continuity of physical activity and the intense visual concentration. Jean, you need to be aware that when we talk about the visual concentration, what we refer to is how many hours a day.
Tony's back.
You'll need to unmute yourself, Tony. There we go. Welcome back, Tony. We've been talking about you this entire time.
I knew it.
Jean, just so you're aware, when we talk about, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, when we talk about visual concentration, what we're referring to here is how many hours a day is someone sitting in front of a computer screen, basically. So that's what that refers to. Psychological stress, physical demands, what's the visual attention required, eye strain, so forth and so on. Intense visual concentration is not limited to computer use, but that's typically where we see it falling. Could be printed material as well. 1 is no undue fatigue, variety of activities, typically, and again, we're talking about the norm here, sitting, standing, walking, maybe 20% of his or her time in front of a screen or printed material. 2 would be some fatigue, infrequent bursts of physical activity, lifting, climbing ladders, shoveling snow, visual screen time 20 to 50%, sitting at the workstation 20 to 50% of the time. Moderate fatigue, moving about, some typical heavy lifting, pulling, pushing, awkward objects, more moderate physical exertion or fatigue, visual concentration more than 50% of the time, extended periods of time sitting or standing. 4 is frequent fatigue, considerable amount of physical effort with limited opportunities to rest. Fatigue occurs daily as a result of considerable moving, standing, physical effort. 5 is repetitive, strenuous fatigue, requires constant physical effort, opportunity to rest only at scheduled breaks. And 6 is extended, strenuous physical work. Where have we been on this previously, Diane?
It's been a 2.
Good, 2, thank you. Jean, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say 2. I mean, I think if I asked my staff to climb ladders, they'd revolt. But the 20 to 50% of the time on a
Yeah.
computer is definitely relevant.
Yep, okay. And there might be the occasional lifting of books, but it's not a
Yes.
day-to-day strenuous activity.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do I see any other hands raised on this? If not, let's bring it to a vote. Tony, are you caught up with us here in terms of the factors?
Well, I'm familiar with the factors, but
Yeah, okay.
not the conversations you've been having, so.
No, but I mean, in terms of this factor, you've got it in front of you, you're set to go.
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. John Ferrara?
No comments?
Okay, if not, let's take it to a vote. You said, Diane, it has been a 2 previously,
Yes.
and I think you said Jean was comfortable with that. Diane, your vote?
2.
John Ferrara?
Two.
Tony Antico?
2.
Mark Leckman, 2. And the last factor is working conditions. Horrible. That was a joke, Gene. That was a joke. My poor sense of humor.
Not what it
Working
was a year ago, I can tell you that.
What's that?
It's not what it was a year ago. I mean, they're
Right,
fine,
you're right.
but
Working
Focus.
conditions, it evaluates the disagreeable aspects of the job environment from the point of view of employee safety and comfort. The degree of severity of workplace hazards is considered. Hazards, we must assume that all reasonable and legal occupational health and safety practices are in place and adhered to. 1 is generally agreeable. It's considered what most would define as a standard office environment. 2 is generally agreeable, some disadvantages, noisier, hopefully not in the library, dirtier than normal, bothersome odors, potential accidents or illnesses limited to minor injuries, may require outdoor work occasionally. 3 is mostly agreeable with some minor disadvantages, exposures to heat, cold, humidity, dirt, soil, noxious noises, odors, noise, noxious odors. Potential hazards involve dangerous materials. I don't think we need to get beyond that here. Where has this been previously, Diane?
The majority of the library staff has voted as a 1.
Okay. Jean?
yeah, I would agree with 1.
Thank you. Any hands raised for further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take that to a vote. Diane Doyle,
1.
John Ferrara,
1.
Tony Antico,
1.
Mark Leckman, 1. Thank you. Before we just finalize the discussion on this, Tony, let me give you an opportunity. Again, I know you lost your connectivity here, but based upon your thoughts coming into the meeting, which I know you discussed a little bit, is there anything else you wanted to add in general before we go to the actual classification?
Well, I'll tell you, these people are highly qualified, and this job description for the head of circulation is outstanding. So I don't know. And then one other thing caught my eye was the library associate. Apparently there's a woman in there now who has 20 years as a school librarian. And the specific education requirement is a high school diploma.
Right.
That's rather
Right.
amazing. So
Let's hold on any discussion of that one until we're going to get to that very
okay.
quickly.
One other question that I had here when I initially went through this, and it seems like a brand new area was with the head of circulation, or the archival duty area. Apparently
Right.
a brand new
Yep.
situation. So these that's why I started with the job description,
Right.
to make sure that we understood exactly what was, at least I wanted to be knowledgeable of all the items that went into a review of the job factors. So
Thank you for that, Tony. We did in fact have some discussion. Gene enlightened us as to the nature of the archival responsibilities. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think as a result of that, we did bump up one of those factors a bit as a result, did we not?
Yes, I believe
Yeah,
there was.
that's what I thought. Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Consequence of errors.
Yes.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we did bump it up accordingly to based on Gene's description of the importance of the town
right,
of the archival response, even though the archival responsibilities aren't, 40 hours a week, it's still important stuff for the town, and we don't want to, that's where we don't want any errors being made, certainly,
right.
among other places, so.
I agree.
Okay, with that in mind, what we typically do now, correct me if I'm wrong, is look and see where the classification has led us, and then any final thoughts to make sure that it, again, as we talked about earlier, does it make sense based upon other people within the town community that are listed at the same level of the classification? So I think we've lost Tracy for the moment, but if there are no further thoughts, Diane, where does this bring us?
So the classification lands at the 15.2 where it currently sits, which it looks as though, Jean, that's what you were sort of anticipating, that it would sit within the same range.
Right.
And, it did, the factors themselves did raise just a little bit. It went from a 280 to a 287.5, which still sits at a 15.2. Usually where I speak to at this point is how does it sit within the hierarchy of the town? And I think that's where we see that the circulation librarian does have a very important role. It sits sort of at the same level of the health inspector, firefighter, planning department administrative assistant, again, the firefighter level. So I think that when I look at how it sits within the hierarchy of town, I think we, again, are right where we should be. And, I don't see that there was any factor that we discussed that would throw it one way or the other. I think we all pretty much were in agreement on the factors that got us to the 15.2.
Okay, thank you for that. Other thoughts?
Tracy?
Tracy, you're muted. Good, Diane.
We have landed at the 15.2, which is currently where the position is rated. So there was no significant change from one classification to another. And when I look at how it sits within the hierarchy of the town, I think it's fairly well suited. It does speak to the importance of the position when you look at it compared to the health inspector and firefighter positions, both being rated at the same level.
Okay. And the last thing I would reference, again, going back to Gene's opening remarks, and Tracy, I do this because I think you joined us a couple of minutes late. I'm not sure you may have heard this part of the discussion, but I was explaining to Gene as is always the case, because Gene was curious about it, and rightfully so. Gene was curious about how employees might move, within their classification range as it relates to compensation. What the rate of pay is. What kind of horizontal and or a vertical movement that might be within a classification range. And I explained that that is not the purview of the subcommittee. We have never been responsible for, or, part of the process when we're discussing what any individual employee should be, how that person should be compensated within their range, that's an external discussion that occurs, between the members of a particular department, the supervisors or managers in that department, certainly you as the town administrator, and or any boards or committees that are responsible for that particular functionality within town. And so this is not the place that we typically discuss how, if at all, somebody moves from one pay rate to another. That's a separate conversation altogether. Is that a fair commentary?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Jean, and you're comfortable with that? Okay, good. With that in mind, it sounds like we are good with the new title of Head of Circulation. And if there are no objections, we'll turn to the second job description now and go through the classification again.
So just as a administrative piece, so we're gonna accept all the changes to the job description. The only thing that we would add back in, Jean, would be the 1 to 3 years of experience.
Okay,
And then that job description would be finalized and signed off on.
okay.
All right. Thank you. Let's move to the secondary position, which is, and I guess that if I'm reading this correctly, Jean, the title will stay the same, Library Associate Circulation Department.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Any quick introductory remarks you'd like to make relative to this position?
I think most of it's straightforward. I don't know, Diane, if you were able to forward the library comparisons that I sent.
Again, Jean, that would be outside.
Right, that's out of your purview, right? So as I was siphoning through this stuff, I had made some comparisons within the library world. The Mass Board of Library Commissioners accumulates statistics and sends them out to libraries every year based on reports that we also submit to the state.
Right.
And they do comparisons of everything in libraries, including salaries. So that is a point of reference that library directors tend to use when they're hiring, to get an idea of what libraries of similar size in towns with similar populations pay their employees. So I had put together a spreadsheet for myself. It's tricky, especially in small libraries, because in small libraries, staff wears so many different hats that sometimes the titles are not, exactly lined up. But when I did it for library associate, I did notice that our compensation range was on the low side. For the other position, it was not. But our compensation range was on the low side, and this position itself was what this person is currently being paid was below the minimum for a lot of the other libraries, because what the libraries provide is minimum and maximum. So I can average that all out. So that was really the most telling thing for me, that, while the circulation position is probably right where it needs to be, and we've determined that today, this one perhaps needs to be looked at in terms of, again, I know it's not your purview, but the pay rate, in addition to the fact that she has taken on, or the position has taken on, more responsibilities.
Right, and I would say in reverse order, that, the additional responsibilities may or may not, become a factor in the classification. We'll do that as we get through the discussion. But as you readily admitted just now, the market data, the salary surveys, that is not irrelevant in any way, shape, or form in terms of, having discussions internally, perhaps you and Tracy or you and the board, relative to how Newbury pays its library staff. That's fair. It's appropriate data to use in your discussions. Unfortunately, it sits outside of our purview. it's
Yeah.
not one of the factors that we consider. But certainly when any manager makes the case that, you know, as I always recommend saying, you know, if I had to replace this person, you know, what would it cost to replace that person? That then becomes a factor, not for us in terms of the classification, but in terms of the real life conversations that occur
Right.
day to day. And so I would encourage you that, you know, to bring whatever data you have available to you to those internal discussions, if and when that time becomes appropriate. We can't speak to that, however.
Exactly.
Fair? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. If there are no further discussions.
Mark, I have a question.
Yeah, Tony, go ahead.
I noticed that the position was given a 12.2 range. This is from Jean's notes, her cover letter before. And now I'm looking at a job description. I don't know whether the 12.2 was based on the new job description or the prior job description.
That would be the prior one.
Only
yeah.
the prior one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this one may equal that or exceed that or whatever the
But
result is. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's the same way we always go into these subcommittee
Right.
meetings. The literature includes what the current classification is, and then we get through it and decide how, if at all,
Right.
that needs to
Okay.
change. But the 12.2 does represent the existing job
The
description.
existing, right.
It's
I
not, yeah,
understand.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It would be premature for Gene or anyone for that matter to assume that the classification would jump from an X to a Y until we've had this conversation.
Right, okay.
So,
Perfect.
okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's start at the beginning again. Complexity. The degree of complexity of the tasks performed, the judgment necessary to make decisions, refers to the use of knowledge and experience in making decisions. Factors include the variety and intricacy of the activities performed, and the ranking levels increase with the variety of activities and the difficulty of the problems faced in decisions that they deal with. A 1 is highly repetitive, a few simple tasks. Decisions are really required and limited to tasks performed. A 2, wide variety of tasks performed with standard procedures. Occasional exceptions are encountered that may require analysis or resolution. This individual makes decisions regarding the setup and sequencing of priorities, makes recommendations that are made to makes recommendations that are made that affect tasks or could change outcomes. A 3 is somewhat complex. Assigned projects, exceptions are analyzed and resolved. Decisions involve identification of alternatives to improve procedures and techniques. I don't think we need to get beyond that here. Diane, where has this been ranked previously?
It was a 1.
A 1. Thank you. Jean, your thoughts?
I would maybe, if anybody was willing to do 1.5, I think it does. There are some parts of 2.0 that do apply. Occasional exceptions are encountered that may require analysis to resolve. That would oftentimes, maybe it's an outlier, but it would oftentimes be when her direct supervisor was not there. Decisions about basic job, basic tasks would be made by her, and makes recommendations that could affect tasks or could change outcomes. Definitely applies from 2. So while maybe not all of 2 applies, some of it does, I think.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Tony, let me turn to you first on this one.
I was looking at this as more toward a complete 2 than a 1.5. And in spite of the fact that it's glaring out at me, this only requires a high school diploma.
Well, I think we need to separate those two issues. They're not
No,
mutually
I understand, but I'm looking at the totality of it, quite frankly. I would say a 2 on this one because, they are routine, but that doesn't, anyway, that's just my thought.
Gene, can I just clarify, what is the degree of frequency with which this person would need to be making recommendations that could change outcomes, affect tasks? I mean, you said it might be an outlier. Is it a regular thing? Is it on an occasional basis when his or her supervisor is not around, they might have to make the occasional decision that's not exactly, written in stone or?
Yeah, the making the decision would be when her direct supervisor wasn't around, but the making recommendations, that those two positions work very closely together. So there's a lot of collaborating and a lot of communication involved.
Mhm.
It's not a top-down kind of thing. So that's what
Okay.
stood out to me was the
Okay.
making recommendations.
Thank you. Other discussion?
My only input is the specificity aspect. Even though most of the aspects are perfunctory, there seems a large contingent of teaching and instructing patrons. A lot of responsibility to be uptight and close to the patrons that come through the door.
Yes.
Thank you. Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll take this to a vote. Diane Doyle,
My vote is a 1.
John Ferrara,
I'd give it a 1.5.
Tony Antico,
2.
and Mark Leckman, 1.5. All right, well, I'm not sure whether that's the first time we've come across this. Tracy, let me speak to you. Let me ask you to speak to it.
You need the majority of the committee to vote on one of the ranking factors.
Okay, so because there are 4 of us, the 2 people voting for 1.5 makes it a split decision.
Right.
So, yeah, okay. John, let me go to you first. I guess the question would be, well, I'll open it up to everyone again to reconsider.
Honestly, don't have enough hands-on witness to what the associates do day to day. I'm just going from the specific duties, and my sense is that the associates are the ones who are really the primary touch and feel aspect of teaching and directing and getting people comfortable with the database and helping research projects, et cetera.
Mhm.
So I'd like to stay at 1.5.
I generally, this is not a vote, by the way. We're still having conversation here. I would agree. I'm not sure it rises to the level of a full 2. But as much as I understand about the nature of that role, I guess I do consider to be more complex than just, highly repetitive decisions are rarely required and limited to task performs. I could see this person, even beyond just an outlier basis, I could see this person having to make the occasional decisions. And it's not just a perfunctory, 8 to 3:30 every day, head down, nothing more you have to worry about. So I would certainly be comfortable bumping it up from a 1, and I would keep it at a 1.5. I just don't think it reaches a 2. Tony, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I certainly could. I don't want to stop the whole process here, but I could go to 1.5.
Diane, other thoughts before we revote?
Good as well. I don't think it's a 2. I see the point for it being a little bit above a 1, so I would go 1.5.
All right, then let's take a formal vote on that. Seeing no more discussion. John Ferrara,
1.5.
Diane Doyle,
1.5.
Tony Antico,
1.5.
Mark Leckman, 1.5. Tracy, thank you for saving us from ourselves. And Jean, thank you for your input there. I think that's appropriate. Next factor, education. I don't think we need to go through the reading of this again. I think it's pretty straightforward. Let's just go to the ranking. Jean, you've got high school diploma. Others is desirable, but I assume that the strong preference or the prerequisite is a high school diploma or the equivalent GED, which would bring it to a 2, unless I'm missing something here. Jean, your thoughts?
I guess there, you have to keep, or at least I would want to try and keep open to the idea that if this position was vacated tomorrow, that perhaps we would, ask for a bachelor's degree, when this person was hired before I was director. So I don't know how that plays in here, but sometimes you have to kind of play the market. I mean, there's a lot of job openings in library world right now. So I might bump it up. I can't say for sure, but again, I don't know exactly how that applies here.
Well, based upon the job description that you've written, the only interpretation we can have, well, I speak for myself here, the only interpretation I have is that while something beyond high school or GED is preferred, you would certainly consider, and it's within the realm of possibility that you would hire somebody who was a high school graduate or a GED if he or she brought the other requisite skills, talents, and perhaps experiences to the table. We have
Right.
to be true to the job description here.
Right.
And that's the way it's written. So I'm going to assume, unless you say you need to reconfigure this job description, that it probably wouldn't get beyond a 2. Other thoughts?
No, I would,
John, other thoughts?
None, thank you.
Tony, other thoughts?
No, not right now.
nope,
Diane, no? Okay, seeing none. Let's vote on this. Tony Antico,
2.
Diane Doyle,
2,
John Ferrara,
2,
and Mark Fleckman, 2. Experience. The time required to develop the necessary skills and experience to perform the job duties and responsibilities. Experience is defined as the length of time required to acquire the minimum skills necessary to fulfill the duties and responsibilities of the position. When assessing the required amount of experience, consider the complexity of the issues faced and the amount of judgment exercised. And it goes from a 1, which is 1 to 6 months of experience, up to a 2, which is 7 to 12 months, a 3 is 1 to 3 years, so forth and so on. And I think, I'm sorry, you do have experience required in this one, is 2 years experience in a public library preferred, correct? Jean, is that where you sit on this?
Yes.
Okay, and if that's the case, that would put it as a 3. Diane, how was it previously rated?
a 2.5.
A 2.5. Which is somewhere between the 7 to 12 months and the 1 to 3 years. Thoughts on that? Jean's got it rated as a as a 2 years experience, which would tuck it into the 3 category versus a 2. Let's open this up. Discussion? My thoughts are if Jean is looking for 2 and we're comfortable with that, that would clearly fit it as a number 3, 1 to 3 years of experience. Other thoughts? Discussion?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, let's vote. Diane, are you voting? I'm sorry, what is your vote?
3,
Tony Antico?
3.
John Ferrara?
3,
Mark Fleckman, 3. Next factor, independent action. The amount of, the initiative required to perform the duties and responsibilities, the creativity and original thought required, the amount of direction and control received from the supervisor. It goes from a 1, which is works under close supervision, no latitude to make changes, refers all but the most routine questions or problems to the supervisor. A 2 is work defined by standard practices. This person prioritizes, occasionally makes decisions on the setup of work without the supervisor, and refers all significant problems and or concerns to the supervisor. Number 3, the differentiation is this person refers only unusual problems to the supervisor, proceeds on his or her own when the majority of duties is defined by general instructions, uses initiative and or ingenuity to identify potential problems. Diane, where have we been on this?
This one here is a 1. Independent action is a 1.
Independent action, correct.
Yep, 1.
Jean, your thoughts?
I think I see it maybe again between 1 and 2.
And what would that be based on?
Well, the work is defined by standard practice and established procedures. Occasionally makes decisions on setup of work, as we discussed earlier. And I mean, all 4 of those apply, and then for 2. And then, of course, the last refers all significant problems and or concerns to the supervisor. So, and you know, in 1 to say no latitude, I wouldn't say that's the case. I mean, it's, yes, that position reports to her supervisor, but she definitely, her input is definitely asked for and desired.
And does this person work on a regular basis, independent of the supervision of his or her superior? And does this person regularly make decisions on the setup of work and handle all but significant problems on his or her own?
I wouldn't say regularly, but occasionally or
Occasionally.
sometimes. Part of the time, I guess is what I would say.
Part of the time. Okay. So perhaps more than an outlier, but not on a regular basis.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. Other discussion points? All right. Seeing none, I'll take this to a vote. Tony and Tico,
I would say 1.5.
John Ferrara,
Clearly between 1 and 1.5, I could live with 1.5.
Diane Doyle,
I'm gonna hold it a 1.
and Mark Leckman, 1.5. All right, we are at 1.5 there. Consequence of errors. This factor assesses the likelihood and the probable effect of any errors on the job, and it considers who's affected, the department or unit within the department, the entire department, the town, or the public. How the extent of the losses to the town might be impacted by these decisions or judgments. Is it a normal error versus an extreme error? How easy is the error to correct? It goes from a 1, which is errors are readily detected, easily corrected, may cause credibility loss to the individual. A 2, errors are probably detected by others within the work area. Slight loss of credibility to a unit or a department. Might require replacement of materials or equipment. 3, errors affect the work of others but are not generally damaging to the town. Errors are detected and corrected before they become serious. It may cause loss of significant amounts of time. Errors may have adverse impact on the public or employee relations. I don't think we need to get beyond that here. Jean, your thoughts? Oh, I'm sorry, check that. Diane, where has this been previously?
It's rated a 1, as with many of the other positions at the library,
Okay, thank you. Jean?
staff positions.
I would agree with 1.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll take that to a vote. John Ferrara,
1.
Diane Doyle,
1.
Tony Antico,
1.
Mark Leckman, 1. Thank you. Contacts. This refers to the relative importance to the organization of the working relationships required of this position. These contacts can be internal or external to the organization. They may take a variety of forms: face-to-face, on the phone, public appearances, and/or the media. Who are these contacts? What is the purpose of the contacts? What is the importance to the town of these contacts? They could include, but are not limited to, residents, elected officials, members of the town boards, appointees, so forth and so on, coworkers. A 1 is routine within the immediate area. Basic information is given and received. No significant contact beyond immediate associates. Routine with occasional discussions outside the immediate area. Occasional contact with the public, town officials, board members. Frequently provides routine information to more than one source. A 3 is frequent and important beyond the immediate associates. Tact to discuss problems, resource person, make recommendations, limited responsibility for securing cooperation, regular contact with the public, town officials, board members, some responsibilities to persuade, convince, and secure cooperation. 4 is frequent and important for the purposes of clarifying town procedures and resolving basically town issues. Diane, where were we here?
Contacts. It was rated a 2, again, as with most of the staff positions in the library.
Thank you. Jean, your thoughts?
I think 2 makes sense.
Thank you. Any discussion? With that in mind, let's take it to a vote. Tony Antico, I'm sorry.
2.
Diane Doyle,
2.
John Ferrara,
2.
Mark Leckman, 2. Supervision. And bear in mind, Jean, this is where we kind of separate into 2 categories: the character of that supervision and the number of employees. The character being, what's the nature of the supervisory responsibility? Correct me if I'm wrong here. There is no supervisory responsibility here, is there?
Again, it would be volunteers, but
Right, on the occasional basis, but
Yeah.
for the purposes of this grid, there is no, so I don't think we need to spend an awful lot of time here. It seems like there is no supervision involved. So I would assume this has not been rated at all. There have not been points given to it in the past, Diane?
It's been
that
0.
correct? Yeah.
Correct.
That would seem to still be the case. Other discussion on that? I'll take that to a vote. John Ferrara,
0. Retain.
Diane Doyle,
0.
Tony Antico,
0.
Mark Leckman, 0. There is no supervision, again, 0 there. Physical demands. Degree, frequency, severity, intensity, and continuity of physical activity and intense visual concentration, bearing in mind, again, the visual concentration refers to either staring at a computer screen or the like, or printed matter on a hour-to-hour basis. Psychological stress, physical demands, visual attention required. Everything goes from a 1, which is no undue fatigue, visual concentration less than 20% of the time. A 2 is some fatigue, infrequent bursts of physical activity, heavy lifting, climbing, ladders, visual concentration 20 to 50% of the time. A 3 is moderate fatigue, moving about, some heavy physical effort, lifting, pulling, pushing. It involves activities that cause moderate physical activity, visual concentration greater than 50% of the time, extended periods of time sitting or standing. Where did we have this previously?
Was previously rated at a 2.
At a 2. Okay. Before we go any further, can you remind me what we rated the previous position, the head of circulation? Was that also a 2?
A 2.
The state is a 2?
Yes.
Okay, and this has been rated historically as a 2.
Yes.
Thank you. Jean, your thoughts?
2 makes sense.
Pretty consistent with both positions are similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any further discussion?
No.
Seeing none, I'll take a vote. Tony Antico,
2,
John Ferrara,
2,
Diane Doyle,
2.
Mark Lechman, 2. Working conditions. I will not make my usual joke here. It evaluates the disagreeable aspects of the job environment from the point of view of employee safety. The degree of severity of the workplace hazards is considered. We must assume all reasonable and legal occupational health and safety practices are in place. It ranges from 1, which is basically a standard office environment, 2, generally agreeable with some disadvantages, could be bothersome odors, could be a dirty environment. Illnesses or accidents are limited to minor injuries, may require occasional outdoor work. I don't think we need to get beyond this here. What has this been rated in the past?
A 1.
A 1. And did we rate the previous job description as a 1 also?
Yes.
Thank you. Jean, your thoughts?
1 works, makes sense.
Thank you. Other discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. Diane Doyle,
1.
John Ferrara,
1,
Tony Antico,
1,
Mark Lechman, 1. I don't think there are any other extraneous considerations to cover here, unless there's any other discussion. Obviously, Jean, I'll start with you. Anything else that we haven't covered you think is relative to this particular subcommittee?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered it.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
I do have a question. So Jean, could you just go back and refresh my memory again? So it's library director, assistant library director, head of circulation, and then from there, the positions, you have children's librarian, and then you have some circulation, you have associates and technicians.
Right. So there in library world, there is a designation difference between associates, a library associate and a library technician.
And so where do they fall relative to each other?
Well, they're in the same classification range. The library technician that we have is only a 4-hour position. She's a cataloger.
Okay.
So that, but she's been there a long time. So her salary right now is higher. But the starting for both of them, for both associates and technicians, is usually the same. So we have a library associate in circulation and a library associate in youth services. Is that your question?
Yeah, so you're saying that the technician and the associate are sort of on par with one another?
Their tasks usually tend to be a little different. Again, it's kind of one of those situations where the roles have morphed over the years, depending on what positions we no longer have and what tasks need doing. But generally, they're, as far as I understand, they're in the same classification. They're similar, but technicians tend to have a little bit more cataloging and technical tasks, so they tend to get paid a little bit more.
Okay, so I failed to mention on a couple of the categories or the factors, all 4 positions were rated in a certain way. And if they are on par with one another, I don't know whether it makes sense to revisit those couple of factors. I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear. For example, just complexity and judgment. All 4 of the positions, 2 technicals and 2 associates, were all rated a certain way. And we've given more weight here in this instance.
Okay, I think I see what you're saying. Yeah, I would say that again, there's just so much morphing as goes on in town hall. I know, jobs You hire somebody and then they end up wearing so many different hats. In this case, I would definitely say that the library associate job has taken on more responsibility, performed some reference tasks, has to have far more technical skills. So yeah, if that addresses your question, in our case, the library technician only catalogs and she's only there 4 hours. If I were to hire an 18-hour-a-week, say, library technician right now, we'd have to visit that
Okay.
in terms of what we needed from that position.
Diane, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I look at it from the perspective, I always look at it how it relates to other positions within the department as well as within the town. And I see this one sort of moving. And I just want to make sure that as we relate it to other positions within the library, that we're being consistent. And there's two categories in particular where I just want to make sure that we're all still in agreement on.
Could you say those categories again, Diane?
The first one was complexity and judgment, and the second one being experience.
I'm sorry, you said the experience?
Actually, there are three. Judgment, number 1, experience, number 3, and independent action, number 4. We've rated this a little bit above the other positions.
What I've heard, I'm sorry, what I've heard from Jean would suggest that, Jean, please correct me if I'm misrepresenting at all your thinking on it. It sounds like as these positions have morphed and perhaps taken on greater degree of responsibility, that in your eyes, you can see a differentiation between this role and the library technician's role in terms of the overall level of importance that you place on it within your library environment.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair? Is that a
Yes.
fair characterization of what you're saying?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And if that's the case, then I can see why we may have split from what the original rating had been. That makes some sense to me.
Okay.
Other thoughts on that? Either John or Tony?
Nope.
Okay. So I think we've completed the factors. If there's no further discussion, let me ask Diane where that puts us, whether it has in any way impacted the current classification range.
So it comes in at a 165, which is a 13.2, not a 12.2, which puts it on par with the technical services librarian. It puts it on par with some other folks as well.
Such as?
Communications officer, call firefighter, DPW administrative assistant. Administrative assistant to the police department. It seems to bump it up into a category that I'm not quite sure I see it, but and that's why I brought up those 3 other factors that we sort of split hairs that would have made the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just asking the question again. It looks like it's bumping it up above those other level of positions. I don't know.
Possible that the experience factor is what took it up.
Yes, so if we looked at the experience alone on the other 4 positions at the library, they were between a 1.5 and a 2.5, and we rated it a 3. And that would have made the difference, just that experience factor alone. Not to
I
mention the
think
other.
maybe we run into this every once in a while where, at least I do personally, where I have trouble with determining how very disparate roles in very different parts of the organization compare with one another. You know, sometimes it's easier to look at 3 or 4 roles that are rated the same and say, yeah, that makes sense. In this particular case, where you're evaluating a library associate versus a call firefighter perhaps versus something altogether different, an administrative assistant in another department perhaps, or an administrator in a different position, I have a little bit more of a challenge equating one to the other. And whenever I'm in that position, I always fall back on the process that we went through to get to this classification, which I am comfortable with. I think we've taken into consideration the changes in responsibility here, the breadth of responsibility this person has in comparison to how the job was originally rated. And personally, I'm comfortable with where it sits, if that means going from a 12-2 to a 13-2. Other thoughts,
Can I just say something?
please?
I'm so appreciative of this experience because, this is a very painstaking process, obviously, and it's been very educational for me. But everybody's perspective is different. My perspective, just even opening up this can of worms, so to speak, was more coming from a compensation level perspective of just trying to make sure that we have, job retention and job satisfaction, and that people stay in Newbury and, stay with us. Some libraries hire a lot of part-time positions just to make sure that they don't have staffing issues. My approach is more really to have a core of full-time librarians that are very invested in the library and in the community. And, I feel like that prevents turnover, that prevents people wanting to leave. But I also want to provide them with the idea that they can, their compensation, that there's some sort of mechanism for their compensation level to be increased beyond a 2% COLA that we don't really know they're going to have every year. So it really was more curiosity about what that mechanism is to, I'd have no problem with them staying, with this position staying in the classification level she's in. I just would really love to know how to help her feel that she can, grow in that position, including financially.
Right. And that's how you started the conversation today. And as we've said a couple times, full disclosure, we have to make an evaluation or make our judgments on the classification irrespective
Exactly.
of pay rate. That's a separate issue. We give the town the guidance within the classification to look at a min and a max and a mid and so forth. And then, and that's why we purposely stay away from budgetary issues. It's why we stay away from, negotiating pay rates. That is not our purview. We just give the town overall guidance of a classification system. We do not want to make any subjective evaluations here as to, in this meeting, well, if the town of Gloucester pays its library technician X, why are we paying Y? As we know, there are a wide number of varied factors that go into, the makeup of any town government and where the priorities lie and where the opportunities exist. So as long as you people stay within the range that's created, you have the opportunity to address those subjects with Tracy and or your board and anybody else that's part of the pay rate decision process.
And see, that's something I didn't quite realize until this today.
Yep. Well, we don't see you that often.
True.
Excuse me.
Yes, Tony.
I have a comment about this. And again, I was so surprised as a former educator. I always look at the level of education, et cetera, and this requires this position of the library associate requires a high school diploma or GED. So this woman who comes in, I'm leading to the idea that if you exceed requirements, you do come in and you get, while on the job, you get a college degree or associates or bachelor's or whatever. Where is that accounted for in a classification scenario?
The answer is it's not. It can't
right.
be. Yeah.
That's the thing. In other words, that is left to programs, what the town agrees to in negotiations, et cetera, to point to this, but the classification is a classification.
Right, yeah. Tracy may be able to speak more eloquently.
Yeah.
She has more experience with it.
I do, not in Newbury, but in a previous position. We had a situation where, there was an economic downturn, people had lost their jobs, and we had a woman who was a CPA. She had her master's in science of taxation. She had successfully passed the CPA. But the job opening that we had in the town was for an assistant town accountant. It didn't require any of those advanced degrees or certifications, but she wanted that job. I mean, she was fantastic and absolutely deserved much more money. Her skills were amazing, but the job opening that we had didn't require that. So she was confined to to work within the classification schedule. So it does happen that you get people that whose degrees and advanced careers don't necessarily match with the job that's available.
Right. Okay.
And
Here's
absent
another
a performance
sorry.
evaluation system, our hands are very tied right now.
And here's another example of that. Our youth services librarian that we hired, I think 2 years ago, was working on her bachelor's, and after the first year, she got her bachelor's, and she walked into my office and proudly showed it to me, assuming that that was going to get her a bump in salary. And I said, I'm sorry, but that's not how it works. So it's sort of that perception that staff have, as Tracy said, that isn't necessarily based in reality.
Yeah.
But as
And
a
then,
hiring manager, you have to, figure out the right way to deal with these folks.
yeah. And
Mark,
to
if I may ask
Yes,
a
John.
question.
Correct.
My question is directed to Diane. I'm looking down at physical demands, working conditions, and I see for supervision, and then I understand that you have a weighting factor, an algorithm that you apply against the numbers that we've determined today.
Yes.
Dealing with blueberries and pumpkins when you're dealing with firefighters and associate librarians. I'm wondering how I have to assume physical demands for the firefighters was a 6 as opposed to 2. And maybe the weighting factor that's causing this 165, 13.2 result really comes down to experience and physical demands. With the weighting aspect, how is it possible that a firefighter comes in at 165 when so many of the
Excuse me, you said a call firefighter is in the same realm, call firefighter, not.
Are you talking about somebody on the dispatch
On
board?
call, yes.
All right, so they're only handling the incoming messages.
But
Right.
you are driving home the point of, the factors overall in terms of like physical demands. It really came down to sort of those 3 or 4 that at the top that have a much higher rating. And again, that's why I asked Jean to give us her opinion on how it fits with technicians, associates, and alike, because one adjustment on one of those factors throws it back into. And Jean, correct me if I'm wrong, your original information that you presented, you weren't really anticipating that this was going to change any sort of grade. It was more driven from the financial perspective.
Exactly.
Okay. And I did have a comment about your thing with the education. I mean, Tracy has always been a very big proponent of people improving and increasing their education levels. And to answer your question, what happens is, if people were to come in and get a level of degree or a certification or what have you, it makes them qualified for a higher position, which then allows them the opportunity for higher rate and pay. whether it's within the town of Newbury or elsewhere. So, you know, there is the opportunity for someone who's improved their education level, say from a high school to an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, to then afford themselves, if they choose, if it's something that works within their lifestyle, to either move into a position that opens up within Newbury or seek a position elsewhere that affords them that opportunity to make more money.
Oh, absolutely. But she, you know, she's a children's librarian. She'd like to remain a children's librarian, and she'd like to remain in Newbury, you know.
Yeah.
Right. Limited opportunities for growth in certain areas, understood. Again, as we always say, we need to be true to the classification system and grid, and certainly don't want to be focusing our classification based on any individual candidate and any individual's background other than what the requisites are of the job. And, you know, we've identified those requisites. I think we've done a fair job here of looking at the new criteria that you've established in the job description, the increased responsibilities, and we responded accordingly. And I think, Diane, you said it came out as a 13.2. Is that correct?
It did. Yep.
Okay. So I guess the final question is, are there any other comments or concerns relative to where this sits that people want to address? Okay, if that's the case, I think we're at a 13.2. Correct?
Yes, with the caveat that I find it concerning that we're adjusting this one relative to the other three positions, and I would let Jean speak to that, but you know,
When you say the other three positions, you're referring to the three within the library
yes.
community? Okay.
So, yeah, so I'm looking at 13.2, and that's a technical services librarian, which we no longer have. That's another position that I don't even remember exactly how it happened chronologically, but it is no longer in existence, and other positions have taken on those tasks. So the library technician is different from a technical services librarian. So maybe I didn't make that clear in the beginning.
Or a library associate circulation department.
Right. So what if this, you know, what you send this person into the 13.2 range, then the library associate in the circulation department would go into the 13.2 range, but the youth services one would stay where it is. Same position, different department.
Right. That's what I'm suggesting. So I do have a concern about leaving the complexity and the experience. I mean, I have a problem leaving those two categories, putting this into a 13.2. That's just my gut feeling. I think someone, you know, I forget what the experience, what 3 is, but I mean, not to belabor the point, Mark, but I do have a little bit of a concern throwing one into a different category. If they're on.
The experience, I believe, was Gene, the job description said 2 years experience, and that would cleanly fit it into the 2.0 category. Excuse me, the 1.0 category. No, wait a minute. Check that. Supervision. My mistake.
3. Experience is at a 3.
Right, and that's
So-
clearly what I mean. There's no discrepancy there. She's looking for 2 years experience.
Yeah, so I guess now it relates back to the job description. It's like you have someone with a high school diploma that you're asking for 3 years of experience in a position. To me, I don't know if that sort of goes hand in hand. And I'm questioning whether or not that is 3 years of experience on the job with a high school diploma. Is that something that is necessary to meet the standard of the job?
It's very common in the library world, I will tell you.
Okay.
You know, the technical skills that are necessary to for average librarian now to manage the online catalog and manage all kinds of software is paramount, and any kind of experience in a public library setting is so beneficial, you know, to save on the training and everything else. In other words, if somebody has been in a library for just 1 year, they're going to be familiar with the online catalog, all of the technical skills they're going to, or at least most of the technical skills they're going to need, as well as the customer service skills they're going to need, and they can pretty much hit the ground running.
So 1 year.
Well, I said that, you know, even with just 1 year, but 1 to 3 years is a way to ask for more, because
Preference is 1 to 3 is preferable, but 1 would get them on the job running.
I would say 2 years, really. That's what I'm more comfortable with, to be honest. And I think that's what a lot of other directors would, would put out there for this type of position.
I would err on the side of that as well. I mean, I think as always is the case, managers have prerequisites or strong preferences or just preferences. This seems to be at least a strong preference for, if not a prerequisite. And I know when we went through the experience level, no one was questioning whether 2 years was appropriate. And I would agree with Jean that while for some of us it may be unusual, there's no reason to suggest that somebody could have 2 years or 2 years plus of relevant experience without education beyond high school level. I think that's within the realm of possibility. And so personally, I wouldn't want to re-vote on that. I'd be comfortable with where we left it.
Okay, I just want to point out that we lost Tony.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm fine with moving on. I just,
Well, no, we always have these discussions at the end. They're good discussions to have. Absolutely.
okay.
John, your thoughts?
We changed the criterion for years of experience on the previous discussion from 3 years of experience to 1 to 3 years of experience. And were we to change the position for the associate to 1 to 3 years of experience, then maybe reverse engineering at 2.5 solves a lot of the problems.
I mean, you have the head of circulation at 3 years of experience.
And this one is two.
And this
It occurs to
is-
me,
this
occurs
had
to me
three.
that reverse engineering, maybe if Diane's points valid and Jane's points both valid, but this algorithm is not perfect.
Well, yeah, that's a given. It never is. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought we said that the previous position we rated required 3 years of experience.
Yep,
And this one too.
this is the same. It's the same level of
Well,
experience.
that's because we have a spread of 1 to 3 years. We can't do anything about that,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So I'm comfortable keeping it as is. Tony, I can't tell if you're with us or not. It looks like you're frozen on the screen.
He's muted is what he is.
Oh,
You
there
back?
he is.
But he's still muted.
There we go. Let's move quick before we lose Tony again.
Oh, I know. I feel like I'm one of those bothersome, characters.
No problem.
I think you took a time to play that guitar prop in the background.
okay.
Other thoughts?
Done.
So based on a couple of tweaks here, this is moved from a 12-2 to a 13-2. Is that correct?
As it stands now, yes.
Okay. Any further or final discussion before we settle on the 13-2? Okay. Thank you. I think we're done here in terms of Jean's two positions. Jean, anything last second, or are you good?
Again, I'm just so appreciative. I learned so much today. So Tracy, can you just tell me a little bit more about next steps? You said something about personnel evaluations or
No, we don't have performance evaluations.
performance.
That's something the HR board is going to be discussing more in the future. Everything right now is driven by budget, Jean.
I know.
We've had this conversation before, and in terms of 2022 operating budget, my goal is to maintain everything that we have, maintain the staffing levels that we have. That's the priority. You can, the first pass at my budget presentation will include a 2%. But beyond that, you know, the likelihood of it happening in fiscal year 2022 is very limited. I'll be honest.
I'm gonna ask with all due respect that we
Yeah.
hold on that conversation now. Again, technically, it should not be part of the purview of the subcommittee. As we've said, Jean, and Ms. Tracy, where that's an off, that's a different conversation for a different meeting, if you will. And as
Sure.
always, the HR board is happy to offer whatever guidance any manager would like in that regard. But again, that's a separate jurisdiction altogether. So unless there's anything else specific to the subcommittee, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Tony Antico,
Yes.
Diane Doyle,
Yes.
John Ferrara,
Yes.
and Mark Leckman, yes. Thank you all very much for your time and your consideration. We are adjourned. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you.